This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Alsop, the ICG committee member responsible for running our webinar programme. So for today's webinar, we're delighted to welcome back Dr. Rachel Laws of Laws Consulting. Rachel is a social psychology and one of the original founders of commercial semiotics in the UK. She has been practicing commercially for 20 years and is also, and is also the author of 2 books on semiotics. Rachel has been delivering training on this and related methods for the Market Research Society, as well as the ICG and various other groups for more than 10 years now. Rachel is also a fellow of the MRS. Her talk today will be the second part of a 2-part read-along of her latest book, Using Semiotics in Retail. ICG members can save 20% off the cost price of her book by using the code Semiotics20 when making their purchase. The code should be applied at point of purchase on the Kogan page website. A recording of the excellent first part webinar can be found on the ICG website. The second part of the book is about the future. Semiotics is a tool for thinking, and you can use it to get a view of the future of business, retail, employment, technology, and human lives. Rachel is happy to take questions after each section or in a Q&A session at the end of her talk. So if you leave on your webcam and would like to ask a question, please raise your hand or type your question in the chat box and I'll read them out for you. So we're really grateful to Perspective for sponsoring this webinar. Perspective Research Services provides help at every stage of the data journey as an end-to-end experience or simply to dip into when needed. They operate one of the largest independent call centres in the UK and state-of-the-art viewing facilities in the heart of London. They provide qualitative recruitment, face-to-face fieldwork, B2B, mystery shopping and data processing services. Perspective wanted to take this opportunity to also share some of their specialist in-field data collection methods in the retail space. All services can be assigned ad hoc to enhance current research programs, or they can tailor an end-to-end solution, creating an approach to meet specific research needs. To find out more, please do get in touch. So before I hand over to Rachel, here are some more webinars and events we have planned for you over the summer. Don't forget that we're able to offer great value sponsorship opportunities with each of our webinars. Sponsorship normally costs £120 for a lot of exposure on our website, mailers and social media, and of course on the day. Please contact Lucy if you'd like to know more. So our speaker today is Dr. Rachel Laws of Laws Consulting, and I will now hand over to Rachel.
Hey, how are you doing, everybody? Thanks for coming along.
Right, I'm handing over to
yeah, there we go. All right, let me attempt to share my screen. One moment. Okay. Phew. There we go. All right then, folks. Right, let me see if I can shrink some of these details down a little bit. While at the same time just still being able to see where I'm up to, so I can keep an eye on keeping everybody happy. There we go.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to mute my over to you.
Thank you so much. Great to be here, everybody. And I want to say thank you for coming back to hear about the second half of this book. So here's what we're going to do today. So as you may know, if you attended part 1 of this session, so I've recently published this book, Using Semiotics in Retail, which, although I'd published a book previously, Using Semiotics in Marketing, which gives solid advice to people concerning all kinds of different marketing problems, like how to innovate, how to turn around failing brands and all that type of stuff, right? There was, out of necessity, there was only a limited amount of content on retail, even though retail is a lot of the day-to-day business that I do. It's something that retailers and brand owners can really see applications of semiotics there. So that's how I came to write this book. And the first half of this book does what you would expect it to do, in the sense that I think I expected, and also my publishers expected, that it would be a fairly straightforward matter to put together some lists of semiotic signs, identify a bunch of semiotic signs, what kind of things communicate premium, what kinds of things communicate value, what kinds of things could you do at the level of a display or fixture or an aisle in a grocery store, right? And so there's quite a lot of that in the first half of the book, as you know, if you were with me last time. And while I was writing this book, and it was an opportunity to think really deeply about shopping in a kind of concentrated way for several months, rather than doing piecemeal projects for individual brands, And I began to think very deeply about shopping and to realise how important it is to everyday life, and how heavily woven into everyday life it is, in the sense that people own a lot of stuff, right? There are billions of objects in the world now that were made by humans, and that just wasn't the case a few hundred years ago, right? So people own a lot of things, and they didn't make many of those things. For most people, buying stuff, shopping, purchasing, that's the main way in which they obtain things which have material value and social value, right? So I began to realise that I was not, out of necessity, I was not only writing a book about the present day, in which we can make a few changes to packaging and things like that, and have things look a bit more premium or send sales slightly up, but we were also, when we're doing semiotics, we are thinking about the future. We're asking difficult questions about why is society like this? What kind of a society needs this thing, this brand, this promotion to exist, and what does that imply about where we're heading? And that was a kind of turning point while I was writing. And so the second half of the book is about social change. It's about digital culture. It's about Korean pop music. It's about Singles Day in China. It's about the military using exoskeletons for soldiers and all of that big stuff, right? And so that's what we're going to do today. And my plan today is that I can share with you some of the remarkable things that I noticed and encountered while I was doing the research and thinking and applying semiotic questions, right? So I'll share with you some notable sites that I observed on my travels as I was sort of exploring the future through this lens of shopping and retail. And I've got several examples to show you. And then when I get to the end of stimulating your appetite, so to speak, by that time I hope that you will want to do this kind of semiotic thinking for yourself. And so I supply a selection of prompt questions and triggers and hypotheses that you can use starting today to explore your own ideas and develop your own vision of what the future's likely to hold. So just a few light topics there that we're going to tackle this afternoon. All right then, so I'm just going to say this briefly, because I think you already know that semiotics is the study of culture, often consumer culture, and that's important because it's the place where consumers get their ideas. Right? There are essentially two forms of analysis in semiotics. There's what we call bottom up and top down. The bottom up stuff is the stuff that you heard about last time, where you look at signs and symbols and we change packaging and fixtures and communicate certain messages. Right? That's bottom up semiotics. You take a small semiotic sign, figure out what it means, and then place it carefully according to your own choice. The other half of semiotics that is less available commercially is top-down semiotics, because semiotics is not just a single research method, but a whole branch of Western philosophy. It comes ready equipped with quite a large number of challenging hypotheses and prompts and tools for thinking, which will challenge you to discover new insights and new answers to some big questions about the way the world works. So the top-down stuff is the stuff that we're going to be doing today. So the book, Using Semiotics in Retail, broadly divides up into two halves like that. All right then, so I think what I will do is share with you some of the things I saw as I was on my journey with my semiotics hat on, looking at the future and what that means for brands and retailers. And then we'll see, I'll pause and we'll see if we've got any questions and comments. and then I'll continue just for about, I don't know, 10 minutes or something like that, and share some of these prompts and tools that I use all the time so that you can do some for yourself. Okay, so just to begin with then, here are some of the things that made me feel excited while I was writing this book and helped me to use semiotics in a new and different way. So one of the things that I kind of ran into first as I started to think about the future and its role, and the role of kind of consumerism and consumer culture as part of the future, it didn't take too long before I started to run into things like, you may have seen the popular Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, which is all about big tech companies using behavioural data to become extremely good at predicting your behaviour, whether that's clicking through and making actual purchases, or whether it is simply responding to provocations on social media, reacting to content, liking, sharing, and all that type of stuff is valuable. It's a form of a valuable commercial asset, if you like. So the public became quite alert to the idea that they were being manipulated by big tech companies at this moment in time, and they've not stopped being concerned about that. And then for, I guess, the middle class intelligentsia, around the same time, Shoshana Zuboff published her book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, which goes into quite some detail about all of this type of stuff, right? And she talks about the outrage economy and how there are considerable profits to be made out of making people hate each other and stirring up dissent and happiness and tribalism. All of that is very profitable if what you are selling is engagement. So when you start to think about the future, at least if you're me, you kind of run into these things fairly quickly. And because I'm always thinking about things from the point of view of the customer or the consumer, because that's what I get paid to do, it occurred to me that it is very clear right now that in general, consumers, members of the public, just don't really enjoy feeling manipulated. Right? They don't enjoy feeling like rats in a maze who have no choice but to take a certain path and are being observed and studied all the time. Right? Now, when I had a look at what brands normally do to try and sort of relieve this discomfort, one thing that I noticed that they commonly do is they will reassure the customer how special they are. Right? They'll go, well, we realise that you're an individual, you're not like anybody else, and we love you, and you're perfect just the way you are. And look, just to prove that we really mean it, here are some personalised services that we've developed for you. Okay. And of course, that's fantastic, because then whenever you use a personalised service, you're generating more commercially valuable data about yourself, right? So that's normally how it goes. Now, I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do, because clearly, it has a success rate as a strategy. But if as a brand or a retailer, you're a consumer-facing business, you're looking to do something a bit different, this is where semiotics is going to come in, right? Because you can use the questions I'm going to share with you later to ask yourself, how could we do things differently to help you imagine a different reality? What would we do with consumers as an alternative to constantly reassuring them, you're worth it, this is for you, you're special and unique? Right? So it occurred to me that consumers' objection with feeling like a rat in a maze or on the receiving end of this kind of manipulation is to a large extent about powerlessness. It's not that they don't feel special. You're kind of addressing the wrong issue if you just keep telling them how special they are. The issue is not that they don't feel special. The issue is that they feel powerless. The kind of rat in the maze has no understanding of where it is, and therefore no ability to decide where it's going next. And that is what frightens people, right? So after a bit of semiotic pondering about what other versions of reality could exist, it became clear to me that people they can see that technology comes with considerable built-in power to change reality, right? To change the world that we're all currently sort of experiencing. And people want a share in that. That's what they want. They don't want to feel like puppets on a string. They do want to feel like they've had some opportunity to make change in the world. Right? And that is where our client organisations in brands and retailing come in, because that's an idea which can be expressed in a lot of different ways and can be tailored according to things like your budget and where you happen to be in the world and stuff like that. But on a very simple level, business. This is why brands which have a lot of heart and soul and purpose are the ones which stand a chance of survival in this rapidly changing retail landscape. So we could talk about some of those. I'm a big fan of Coco Girl magazine, for example, which is a really inspiring, uplifting magazine for little girls of colour, which pumps energy into building up the confidence of children and showing them futures for their own lives and aspirations that they didn't know were available to them. So that kind of thing will go a long way with consumers, and it's something that you can implement, and that is going to work really well if you can help your customers to feel like they are changing the world, that they are active in building the world that they want to see. And now, well, I've said all of that idealistic stuff about making the world a better place. Let's talk about unfettered consumerism in the form of the immensely profitable Singles Day or Double 11 event in China, which is an event that stretches over what used to be an individual day in November when it first started. It has now expanded in time and takes place over about 3 weeks. And I'm sure you know it already. If you don't know it, it's like the Chinese retail equivalent of the Super Bowl. Okay, so it exists on TV and various other platforms simultaneously, and there's quite often will be celebrities involved and things like that. So Taylor Swift was their leading celebrity recently, and they have this kind of caliber of celebs come and do their thing. So it's a big Chinese shopping festival. It's like Black Friday, except even more magnificent and splendid. And it is doing a lot of things right that Western businesses seem to struggle with, So when I look at what it is doing right, and it's been very pandemic resistant, I have to say, it succeeds in a lot of ways that Western businesses can be a bit reticent about. So, for example, there's an enormous build up to the event. It's really treated as an event of absolutely world-beating importance. Secondly, there are baked-in games, so it's not so much gamification of shopping, which is potentially quite boring, but it's more that there are quite a number within Singles Day, which largely takes place on digital media on people's phones and personal devices. It's very social. You'll be rewarded for being present, for getting your friends involved, and for playing various different games, some of which you could be playing on your own, some of which you might have formed a team with your friends. Everybody benefits because you and all your friends are in some way content creators. You need your own followers because you can monetize that yourself. You see what I mean? So it's a kind of giant pile up of mutual self-promoting. It works really successfully. And it's enormous fun, it's kind of like a digital fun fair. And it makes the Western equivalent Black Friday look very kind of dull and stage in comparison. So what I want to say then, to Western companies, okay, we don't all have the money of Alibaba, for example, or Tmall or Taobao. And it's not necessarily that easy to organise a gigantic sort of nationwide shopping festival. However, what I will say is that there's an underlying principle here that kind of occurred to me as I was looking for the underlying sort of dynamic semiotically, which is that here we've got a situation in Double 11 with all of its bells and whistles and games and social aspects, where the experience of the thing is first and foremost. What's the stuff that you'll eventually buy, like a slightly discounted pair of trainers or a kitchen mixer, is not the main appeal. It's the shopping supports the experience and makes the experience better, right? And so it began to seem to me that as much as we can learn a whole lot of lessons from Chinese business in the form of kind of vertical integration and stuff like that, that one of the best insights from a marketing point of view is that they haven't taken something quite dull like online shopping normally is, especially in Western platforms, and just bolted on a little fun app or element or afterthought to try and make shopping better. You see the reversal here. What they've done instead is prioritise the experience itself, participating in singles day is loads and loads of fun. And if you buy stuff, that supports the experience rather than the other way around. So these are the kinds of things that occur to me when I look at what's going on. While I'm on the subject, I'm just going to say something briefly about play to earn business models. I'm just going to make some brief remarks about the attention economy. So, and this has come up already because I was talking about Netflix, the social dilemma. Okay. Consumers are well aware of the attention economy. Okay. And so clearly the attention economy is about, getting a lot of people are spending all the minutes and hours they have looking at some sort of screen or device, right? They couldn't pay any more attention if they tried, right? And so within that, there's competition from various brands and shopping platforms and news outlets and various things and advertisers, of course, who all want this individual's eyeballs all the time, okay? And consumers are well aware that the attention economy exists, and it works great in favour of businesses. It doesn't necessarily work that well in favour of consumers, right? Because of the outrage economy, because people will be pushed to see information that is not necessarily good for them, just because it gets a response. Right? So some people are asking what happens next. When consumers become aware of the attention economy, they become aware of this, the fact that their attention is valuable and that people are competing for it with distracting games and whatnot. It stops working as well when everybody knows about it and objects to it. Okay, so the next question is what comes next, and as far as I can see, what comes next is play to earn. So that's the point where your consumer realizes that their attention is valuable stuff and they start to want to be compensated for it. Okay. Now the interesting thing is that this gives us reason to think differently about things like store loyalty schemes, loyalty points, and that kind of thing, and customer reward schemes and that type of stuff, right? Because the emerging play to earn economy was not born out of those things. It wasn't born out of a department store or a high street chemist loyalty program. Right? It was born out of the games industry, which is enormously wealthy and knows something about how to keep customers happy. Okay, so play to earn is like a new model of gaming that is leaking out more generally into business, where your customer will first of all be able to own assets which are theirs, which they control, which are different to the assets owned by other customers, and which they can dispose of as they please, including selling them if they want to. And what's more, those assets will increase over time when the game is played or when the service is used. Now that sounds complicated, and we maybe don't have a lot of time today to go into the technical details on the gaming side of it, but let me describe it to you like this. Let's say that you have a favourite health and beauty store that you always go to, and you use the little loyalty card and you collect your points, right? So in all likelihood right now, the points on your card are, first of all, they're non-transferable, so they're kind of stuck there unless you do something with them. And secondly, they're essentially just the same as anybody else's points. They don't change over time, and you'll only get awarded points in a very automatic way for doing specific things like making a purchase, right? So the way that play to earn is going to potentially change all of that is that now increasingly your customer will start to expect compensation every time they allow your brand or your retail outlet to pass through their mind. So if they open your app, then you're going to be giving them virtual coins or tokens or whatever it is just for doing that, right? And the same if they walk through the threshold of your store, right? Those things need to be not contingent on purchase, right? Secondly, it'd be a great idea if your super users who've racked up thousands of points on their cards were able to dispose of these kind of elite objects as they see fit. And thirdly, if your business becomes very, very successful and very profitable and is expanding, then your consumers increasingly are going to expect that those loyalty points which they've carefully accumulated by giving their attention to you, they will expect that those points will accrue and increase in value over time, just like shares in the company. So that's play to earn, that's why it matters. And all of this stuff is, as you can see, is connected. So where we've got consumers doing more and more of their shopping online, setting up automatic replenishment shopping on Amazon so they never have to think again about when it's time to buy tea bags, playing social games on Alibaba or AliExpress, looking for compensation in exchange for brand engagement. And finally, this is where you finally get to mysterious NFTs and stuff like that, which is simply an extension of the same logic, which is where people want to have a hand in shaping reality, and that includes owning currency. The reason there's excitement about this is because they finally got to the point where they're like, look, we want to own the means of production. We're all creators now. We want to have a hand in using technology and not having it used on us. And what's more, we want to own currency. If currency needs to exist, there's no reason why it has to be owned by governments, national banks, the World Bank, and so on and so on. So where I'm coming from. So all of these things are connected together. And so we're in a situation where technology is changing the world we live in very rapidly. It's clearly a challenging time for retailers, whether they're the small traditional store or a giant brand that is struggling to stay relevant and is wondering how it's going to cope with things like automated replenishment shopping. The world is changing rapidly, but it's changing in ways which are not random. All of these things are connected to each other. And so the invitation that I want to extend to you through the second half of this book is to explore this journey for yourself and see where it takes you. Because although it's hard to get a clear vision of the whole of the future because it's so big, just know that all of the things that are going on are not happening in a vacuum or are unconnected from each other. So these are some. This was really where I was kind of progressing on my journey into the future. Okay, and what I'd read a heck of a lot while I was doing the research for this book, as well as applying semiotic questions to what I was learning. And so I had occasion to think about people, about customers. How are they? How are they doing? You know. And so I include a lot of information in this book where I'd collected statistics about mental health on a global level. And so it won't probably be a surprise to you to learn that there's a huge amount of anxiety and loneliness out there. I'm really inclined to notice changes of language. So I noticed that English speakers had recently started to use the phrase shut in. This wasn't a phrase that was necessary until recently in English, but now it's here. There used to be, it's been a longer recognised phenomenon in Japan. So a shut-in is what it sounds like. It's a person who's effectively shut the door on the outside world. Right? So they're often male. They could be of any age. They often will survive, or perhaps are being supported by a family member. And they're, it's kind of like a case of extreme agoraphobia, and they resist employment, and essentially just kind of retire from the outside world. And so this is here now. This is a thing. We've translated it into English because it's a thing now in Western culture. And not surprisingly, it has come along with digital culture, which can be a very scary place. You're suddenly exposed to every human in the world, or that's how it feels sometimes, and they're frequently hostile, and meanwhile your so-called real-world relationships may be becoming a bit threadbare. And so there's a lot of unhappiness out there. And I guess the problem is that where you've got social anxiety, people are afraid of having live encounters with each other, and yet that's what they crave the most, And so it's like the social media and digital culture and its constant acceleration has become a problem and the solution to the problem, but rolled into one, which is not unusual, right? So if as businesses and brands, we want to be ethical and we want to think, what are we going to do about that? I think there are a few examples of brands and products out there who we could look at for inspiration. So, for example, there's a software application. I don't really want to call it a game. It recently won some BAFTA awards for being a game that went beyond the boundaries of gaming. So I would really call it a kind of a social tool. It's like an anonymous social tool, little application that you can use on your phone or desktop. Okay. In its default state, it'll play soothing music, and it'll show you a little gently animated graphic of someone sitting at a desk and studying quietly. And there are plenty of apps out there that are designed to help you do this, calm your mind and encourage you to get on with some work, right? And then once in a while, a letter will arrive at your window, which you have the option of ignoring or opening. If you open it, it will be a request from a complete stranger for some kind words. Right? So it seems like it's mainly used by younger people, and they will talk about younger people problems. So they'll talk about difficulties at school. They'll talk about the difficulties of trying to figure out who you are in this life and kind of build an identity for yourself and this type of thing. Okay? So as the user, then you have the option. Again, you can ignore those things if you want to. They're distributed to everybody who plays. Or you've got the option of replying and dispensing kind words of wisdom. So this has been a smash hit, and I think that it strikes the right note between what seems like people's kind of foundational need to have human contact and to be compassionate and to receive comfort from each other. That need seems to still be there. And yet at the same time, it's kind of quite sanitized. It's safe. It's anonymous. It's moderated. No one's going to get hurt. It's nobody has to suffer the terror of being face to face and looking at each other in the eye. So while I don't think this is a complete solution to human loneliness, it certainly has struck the right note with consumers. And I think that any business which either owns physical space in the form of a traditional retail store or has some digital presence has an opportunity to take some lessons from kind words and give people chances to encounter each other and express kindness and warmth and human sympathy within the platform or the store or the space or whatever it is that you have to work with. And if we can do that, then we've got a chance of addressing real needs and at the same time creating a space that people want to use and are going to look on more kindly than they would where a more functional type of store where there's no reason for them not to go to Amazon. Right? I think that in a few minutes I'll stop and kind of take some questions at the end of this kind of meandering tour. I guess I'll just say one or two things about the future and then kind of wrap it up and we'll have a look at some questions and I will share with you some tools for thinking as well. So just by way of some final remarks here about what I see when I look at the future. I was caused to think about what kinds of things people are going to want to pay for in the future, what kinds of things they want. And it caused me to think as well about the metaverse that Mark Zuckerberg is trying to kind of own, although it's an idea that is much bigger than Mark Zuckerberg or Facebook. The metaverse describes a state of affairs where do you know how all the things you do that require you to log in somehow or use some kind of electronic identity? And so a lot of us are on screens and on our phone for hours and hours every day. And you might be using social media for fun. You might be on LinkedIn for business. Maybe you use a different app to do your banking. Maybe you use a couple of different shopping apps. Maybe there are a couple of games that you play. Maybe you're in a few different WhatsApp groups for your family and friends and all of this type of stuff going on, right? And so we all everybody who's had a go at online retail knows that you lose customers at the point where they're required to enter a password. Right? So that's why in digital businesses there's this constant drive towards essentially kind of creating an ecosystem where you only have to log in once and that's it. Right? So you will see it's happening more and more. It's like Google and Amazon are both getting there, right? Where they offer a variety of different services. You only have to log in once. Apple as well. You can log in with your fingerprint, right? So the idea is that you customers and businesses are happy when you just log in and you don't ever have a reason to log out. Okay. So you can see how perhaps that works from a business point of view, creating an ecosystem where people can do their banking and their leisure and perform their work tasks and all that type of stuff within the same space, like you can do with Microsoft. You can work and play. Right? So the metaverse has occurred. It's a moment that has occurred when all of that stuff joins up so coherently that you have logged in for the last time, and that now being in virtual space is just that's what space is. And being logged out of stuff or not being present or not being detectable is going to become both the preserve of a few very wealthy people who like not being findable and a whole lot of people who've been marginalised and cut out and are not sheltered under the digital umbrella. And I think consumers know that this is coming as well. And this is one reason why they're kind of so keen to latch onto the idea of the metaverse, because I think they correctly discern that it's not actually going to be a free for all. It's not going to be for everybody. At some point, the digital curtain is going to come down. And there will be some people who are living in smart cities and, enjoying the future and virtual reality and all that stuff. And then there'll be quite a lot more people on the other side of what are now digital city walls who are kind of economically excluded and materially excluded, right? And people want to be on the right side of the fence, as well as being excited about the future that they've been waiting for all these years, like flying cars and all of that stuff, right? And so when I think about what kinds of things people are going to want to pay for in the future, people are going to pay for a convincing experience. So people will get better. The tech companies will get better at delivering haptic feedback, for example, so you can feel sensations through your body. People will pay large premiums for privacy. Some people will pay large premiums to disappear or appear to disappear completely. A lot of everyday people will spend money on self-improvement, whether that's the virtual self, their avatar, or their so-called real self. Over time, the virtual self is the more important one and the one that will be more carefully curated. And additionally, I guess people will pay to see things that they've never seen before. And I guess this is why we've got people like Jeff Bezos so interested in flying to the moon, because there's going to be really no substitute for seeing the Earth with your own eyes. Right? And I think that what he wants is an extension of what millions of people want, and perhaps what every human wants, which is to be able to get up into space and really understand for the first time what we're doing here in the universe. Right? So I think this is all stuff that people are going to be willing to pay for according to their ability, and that if we are in the business of providing people's groceries and homewares and things like IT services and banking and all the other kind of services on which everyday life revolves around, then it's possible to see that right now we've got a global population of pretty unhappy consumers, but consumers who are very willing to believe that the utopian future that they've been offered is within reach. And I think that if we want to be completely ethical as businesses, then rather than just telling people that kind of hope or dream or aspiration, that we want to get stuck in and involved with grassroots organisations, community networks, and really do something useful, make that change I was talking about earlier. Find your purpose, find your passion, do something with heart and soul, support people who need it. And that's how you're going to get consumers on your side at a time when they're both very anxious and very excited about what's coming next. Well, what I'm going to do is just stop sharing right there and take a pause, swill some coffee, and maybe we'll take a couple of questions. And then what I'll do, when we're starting to get to the point where we've only got about 10 minutes or so, then I will share with you the tools that I use to reach these conclusions, right? Because all of this comes from somewhere. And so I set out quite a selection of these trigger questions and prompts and hypotheses that enable me to have new ideas. So how's that going so far? Any thoughts or comments or reactions?
Fantastic, Rachel. That's just so amazing. I wasn't expecting that at all from this webinar, but it's really very, very interesting stuff. There's one question already by Caroline. I don't know, Caroline, do you want to ask it yourself, or shall I read it out for you? It's up to you.
I can ask it, that's fine.
Hello.
Hi Rachel, thank you. It was really, really interesting. I feel like I wanted to interrupt you loads through it. Of course I wouldn't, but it was so interesting. There's so many thoughts. On the graph that's showing the lead up, through Bitcoin into sort of decentralized finance, I can really see, there's a desire for that, and there's experimentation in different areas, and people are into Bitcoin, and there's all sorts of different things going on. How given, and I can see that if consumers, don't like to be in this sort of like rat tunnel, it gives them
Mm.
a lot of control. But how would you say governments would respond to something like this, given that they do like more control and
Yeah, they
consumers
do.
don't want to be controlled?
Well, it's all part of this ongoing culture war, of which there are so many culture wars now, aren't there? But there's this ongoing culture war between the man and which essentially big governments, big business, anybody who represents establishment values, and then kind of long-suffering individuals on the street, And so I don't see that dying down anytime soon, but it is expressed differently in different parts of the world. So, uh, what I see in the West is that you've got like entire demographics of younger consumers, often men, who absolutely revere Elon Musk, and he just can do no wrong, and he's the kind of ultimate sort of white frat boy hero. He's cheeky and he's just like them, and he's full of testosterone, and you see him in he's so rich that he's untouchable. He can do anything he wants. He's kind of good humoured about it, which counts for a lot as well. So he's kind of revered. It's a tense relationship with money and capitalism, because a lot of people out there who are kind of broke think that they shouldn't be, and they want some of it, but at the same time they reject the way that other people got it. They don't like rich people because they don't like the way that rich people get their money. So there's that, you get those kind of face-offs in Western culture. But then over in China, you've got a really different situation as well, because there's this visible sort of clash between, on the one hand, China's fantastic at business, like the Alibaba group was amazing and all powerful. But at the same time, if the Chinese government as well has its own very specific values and morals and point of view on the world, and asks a lot of questions that you just never hear asked in the West. I was reading an old speech of Xi Jinping just recently, and where he was talking about cracking down on social media, which on the one, from a Western point of view, you think this is insane, because like China's so brilliant at social media and they're making so much money. Why would the government want to crack down on that? And Xi Jinping talks about vulgar internet celebrities. He says that it kind of degrades the moral fabric of the population, and that he says that when you look at phenomena like some new internet trend or whatever, new internet-based business model, the number one question you should be asking is, how does this serve the people? I was like, wow, I haven't heard a Western person say that for decades. When did the last time you heard a Western business leader or politician say, we need to ask what this is doing for the people? Not what this is doing for individuals, or what is it doing for brands, but what is it doing for the people? Amazing, right? So there's always tension. It's a really interesting situation between these entrepreneurs, have-a-go heroes, small private businesses, tech startups, versus, and some big tech companies as well, who have to work a lot with and alongside governments. And sometimes that's an easy relationship, and sometimes it's tense and difficult, but it's always there. Yeah, I
Okay,
was really
thank.
struck with that speech. I know China's not popular right now, but
Yeah.
as a semiotician, I'm constantly looking for questions that will trigger me to look at the world in a
Mm,
different way, right? And I
mm,
thought that this was a terrific question that you can ask of any innovation, new product, new phenomenon, new shopping platform. How does this
mm.
benefit the people? That's a great question, right?
Yeah, and they are so. I mean, as a complete aside, I'm studying to be an acupuncturist at the moment. So having
Mm,
delved into a little bit of Chinese culture, just a little bit, they
mm,
are not individualistic. They
mm,
don't view the world in that way. And
mm,
I mean, in some of his speeches, he talks about how he doesn't want a hot or a cold war. So
mm.
that his sort of their cultural sort of baseline is balance really, and sort of collectivity.
That's
So it's
right.
interesting. Yeah, thank
Really
you.
interesting, right?
Yeah,
Right.
very.
Do you think there will be any growth in individuals and then groups of individuals who resist and who want to go in an opposite direction to this ultra connected universe that you're portraying for the future? I mean, I know we're already extremely connected, but my gut reaction to that is run and hide and get away from it as quickly as possible. and go and live in a commune somewhere that doesn't have any internet or anything like that? Is there likely to be some sort of a rebellion?
I think that what we'll see is eventually the kind of emigration, so to speak, if that's the right word, of very rich people and very poor people. Everybody else, welcome to the metaverse. This is our future. I'm going to be living here. Well, let's go out and meet the neighbours, you know. But there'll be large numbers of people living in poverty who just simply cannot access all of this stuff, right? And it's going to be tough. And we already see this in urban places. It's not, we're just talking about developing countries. I'm thinking, for example, of enormous homelessness camps in Los Angeles, for example, where you can see streets and streets of tents. People have erected tents to live in, you know. So there's going to be some of that. But then you'll also have wealthy people who will be only too happy to escape back to reality. At this point, we're kind of in Marie Antoinette territory at this point, you know. How she had the gardens built at Versailles and used to, you know, waft about pretending to be a shepherdess and enacting bucolic fantasies. It's going to be a bit like that. Nature's always been a bit like that. Like already, like if you look at travel and tourism, you know, you can take trips to, you know, rural destinations if you're wealthy and go to these extremely exclusive retreats, which are the same unspoiled parts of the world that are inhabited by people who haven't got the money to spoil them if they tried, you know. So I think we'll see more of that. But for everybody else, we're all going to be living under the digital umbrella. Yeah. Hi, Clara.
Hi. Just to add on to what you were saying and talking about connection in a different way, what I noticed and realized and been following is that lots of people are also moving, which is consistent to what you just said, going back to nature and be not connected in the usual technological way, or using the technological connection in a different way. It's just look for higher connections. I mean, I'm really talking about spirituality and going to the core of things and going inwards, but not to just to remove themselves from reality, but going inwards to really explore what we have been missing by putting our attention outside, in fact. And this is one thing. And I totally agree with what you say about the need for companies to really anchor themselves and bring forward the purpose, the passion, the cause, what they are really doing for humanity. Humanizing the future is really very, very important on the industry side. One dimension, which is I just making a few points, and I could watch your seminar, the first part before you started this one, is the care industry, the care concept. There are care cultures. That care needs to be addressed in lots of different ways, not just services are a way of expressing care, but care is per se a huge area which really could be better expressed, better exploited in good terms. Just to finish, I don't want to use your time, but just to finish, I've been studying and doing a lot and thinking of writing a book on sensory semiotics and how semiotics, as you just explored and which you're studying, that semiotic, which is very important for retail design and retail environment and pack design, etc. I'm trying to mix, and I've been doing so for years, and it's just the sensory mix, how the sensory, each one of the sensory channels do interact with one another, and how do they combine in providing consumers with the elements that they would use to decode a reality, like a product or a brand. And this is fascinating because the senses are evolving and the
That's
language
right.
is evolving. So
Do you want to know something really amazing that I encountered the other day?
Yes, tell me.
So it's about fragrance, and
Yeah.
so I was exploring the category over. I did this over about 3 months, and I discovered I tried out a whole load of different fragrances and explored all their branding and stuff. And on my list were two fragrances by the American pop star Ariana Grande, uh,
Mhm.
who I think she's ex-Disney. She was one of those child Disney type of child
Yeah,
stars, and now she's an adult and she makes pop music, right?
yeah.
And so she's got a line of fragrances. They're incredibly successful.
Mhm.
And so I purchased two of these fragrances. I admired the packaging, which is very kitsch and really kind of made out of a kind of rubbery material and designed so that you can put your mobile phone into it, smart
Yeah,
move,
okay.
right? And I smelled the fragrance itself, both of these fragrances, and to me, to my untrained nose, they smelled appalling. I was like, this is horrible. What is
Yeah.
this? This is the worst thing I've ever smelled, right? It smelled like the first one smelled like a plastics factory that was
Mhm.
on fire. Right
Mhm.
behind the plastics factory, there was a coconut. Right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Then I tried the other one. It was a different plastics factory. Right?
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
this is terrible. I don't understand at all. And so
But
I went and looked
yeah,
online to find out if I could
yeah.
read some consumer reviews
Mhm.
and find an explanation. Right? And there were hundreds of teenage girls going, "I love it so much. It's lovely. It's
Of
spray it on
course,
myself all
yeah.
the time." So do you know what I
Because,
found out finally? Right?
yeah,
Finally,
yeah,
I found
yeah,
my
yeah.
answer. One of these girls unpacked it for me. She
Mhm.
said to me, "It's the smell of when you're a little girl and you open a new Barbie doll and you
Mhm.
smell her
Yes,
hair.
yeah, yeah,
Plastic, plastic was there. It wasn't. I wasn't imagining it,
yeah.
but to them, it was the smell of nostalgia. You see what I
Mhm.
mean? To me, because I
Yes,
had it. It
I
was to
get
me,
you.
it was the smell of like,
Yeah. But
pull the
I
party
think that the fragrance industry has always been a mystery to me, and so they're using different codes and mix them in a different way. But the very normal uh, flavors and fragrance used in the food industry, in the household products, or in the home care industry, or
Yeah,
whatever. I mean, you've been working for Lever. I also been working for Lever. It's so important how, to address that if you want to sustain a consumer benefit, and through a sensory sign. So you have to be consistent. The semiotic of the package, and the shapes and the colors,
yeah,
and the smell and the consistency of the product itself, be it liquid or whatever. I mean, all this, it's not being studied, that because of we had to work online, and this makes it difficult. I mean, those things were much easier when we could do groups, and really have sniff tests, and go deeper and deeper and deeper, and use, multi-attribute scales to define sensations, and define a smell or a texture or whatever. And this is, nobody's talking about it. And I think that what we will be doing when the artificial intelligence will take over, and we will skip, the real sensory, physical aspect of the testing. And this is scares me a little bit. The fragrance industry has always been doing their stuff, and it's it's different. And I like yours,
Laura, it sounds
the
like there definitely is a subject for a book there for you. And I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
wondering, Rachel, we've only
I
got five.
wonder if we'd,
Yeah,
yeah, should we
you
finish
mentioned
off?
that you
yeah,
mentioned that
yeah.
you were going to get through some questions. I don't know if you've got time for that now, but otherwise we'll need to wrap up in a few minutes.
I'll quickly finish off. So I promised you a few slides where I would share with you the kinds of prompts that I use in order to achieve insight, whether it's about a small topic or a large one like the future. So I'll just share with you those last few, if I can do that. Yeah, there we go. And hopefully that will be helpful to you. So what I've got for you here is I'm going to show you a couple of business applications and then some prompt questions that I use. This is a very small sample of the stuff that you will find in the new book on retail. So it's not a comprehensive substitute. It's just a taster of the sort of thing that you can get. So when I tell businesses stories about the future, this is how it manifests in advice, right? So I will explain to them, this is why, when when everybody knows, I think on some level that they're supposed to have a brand that's got some heart, a bit of purpose. My job then is to help them know why and what kind of purpose, and to help them understand how to build that into brand messages. Interactivity, anything that you can do to give people a bit of control over what happens, to make their mark, to make something, that build something that lasts. And on your point, Clara, about sensory appeal and real things, being able to touch grass, if you've got a physical store, bring some of the outdoors in. Putting trees in store is always a great idea. Then I get asked a lot of practical questions about things like navigation and signage, and we can use these kinds of insights to help us understand that if we can create a sensory environment that's going to be more appealing than a notice telling people that you've got fresh veg, right? If we can use natural language, conversational language, we've created a more human relationship. And finally, I give a lot of this. If you want semiotic signs, here are some. People all over the world respond to curves. They're signs of fertility, generosity, abundance. Even small children around the world know that pictures of the sun means happiness. You can't go wrong with nature. But also we talked about signs of care. I think you touched on that as well, Clara, that where we want people to notice that this brand or this marketing campaign has been carefully conceived and carefully executed, taking them into account. So this is the type of stuff that I will help clients with. And I'm just going to quickly share with you then, finally, the tools that I use for thinking. These are just a small section of the selection of the prompt questions that I regularly use. So I will often ask myself whether any aspect of the situation that I'm looking at is a simulation. And if so, do people seem to like the simulation more than they like the real thing? For example, just to take a really simple example, do people enjoy befriending each other's avatars more than they seem to enjoy befriending each other in the real world? Another useful question is to recognize that whatever you're looking at is just a version of reality. It's not the only one, right? And to ask yourself, therefore, what new versions of reality are we capable of imagining? Like when I noticed Xi Jinping talking about when you look at social media, we need to ask, how does this serve the people? There's a glimpse of a different version of reality in there, which is worth paying attention to if your native culture is Western culture. Another question is, where do you see people investing in each other? I see a lot of loneliness out there and social anxiety, but I also see an enormous willingness to make kind gestures. People seem to really want to support and comfort each other just as much as they want to be supported and comforted. And that's something that any brand can support and find ways to get involved with. I will usually, if I find a story emerging, actually like the story maybe I was telling about perfume just now, you can always ask yourself when you see a consumer or a brand telling a story whether at the end of the story order has been restored, things have gone back to the way they were, or there is some kind of deep irrevocable change. And that will help you to know what kind of a story you're looking at, right? It will help you to know whether you're looking at a story which is relatively conservative or, shall we say, radical. And then finally, you might make a point of asking what are the mechanisms of power and who is allowed to use them. So this is, again, a whole cluster of questions, really. But for example, you guys were asking me some interesting questions earlier about what's the relationship between privately owned currencies and the state. And that is where these types of questions become very useful, where we can make a point of paying attention to who is allowed to exercise what kinds of power, because that tells you about where we're heading into the future. That's probably all I'm going to say for now, and in any case we're just about out of time. I want to let you know this discount code, which is good until the end of June, and you can use that discount code at koganpage.com, and it's available worldwide. And there we go. I can
Fantastic.
stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That's been really fascinating, as was the first one. If you haven't seen it, then I definitely encourage you to go onto the website and have a look at the recording of it, because both seminars have been both webinars, sorry, have been absolutely fascinating. Right, so thanks to Rachel. Thank you to everybody else for logging on, and any future people who look at the recording of this webinar. Do come and join us at some future webinar, and otherwise have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Luca. Thanks, everybody.